Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Samuel, and I'm involved in some of the communications and the campaign awareness with the Albatross task force. Recently, a paper was released highlighting and sort of uncovering some intentional killing and aggressive handling of seabirds, particularly albatrosses and petrels in Southwestern Atlantic. Along with it as well, some quite distressing images of albatrosses with partly or completely removed bills. And today I'm joined with Dimas Gianuca from Projeto Albatroz and Albatross Task Force in Brazil, who sort of led a lot of the work involved on this paper. So Dimas, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you here and to discuss a little bit more about your work.
Thank you, Samuel. It's a great pleasure to be here speaking to you. And I'm more than happy to clarify any doubts and talk to people about these issues.
That's great, thank you. So I feel like that was a kind of a very basic introduction to yourself there and some of your work. So could you just start off, just tell us a little bit about your work and what you're involved with, and that'd be great.
Yes, I am the scientific coordinator of the Brazilian NGO Projeto Albatroz, which is the partner of the Albatross Task Force in Brazil. And I'm also the Albatross Task Force team leader. So our work, and specifically my work in the technical side of the project, we work close with fishermen at sea to monitoring bycatch levels of seabirds, so we can understand which are the species affected by the target fisheries, and what are the bycatch levels, and how can we develop solutions with fishermen. So our target fishery is the pelagic longline fisheries of southern Brazil, but we also work with demersal longline fisheries and other Brazilian fishing gears. And besides of the technical work, Projeto Albatroz do a lot of awareness and training campaigns as well, targeting fishermen, and also education campaigns and communication targeting broader audience.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dimas. So the paper that was announced recently kind of shook a lot of the seabird world, especially with those images and the findings of that paper. So for anyone that hasn't seen it, could you just briefly summarize what you found?
Well, that paper reports different issues that are actually quite related. One is the intentional killing for reducing bait depredation in pole and line fisheries. So these fisheries, they use live baits, they throw the baits in the water, to then the tuna gets in the frenzy and they start to fish with pole and lines. So we recorded in these fisheries, and in the occasion that there was an onboard observer in another vessel that approached some of these pole and line vessels. So it was possible to observe from the vessel people killing the birds in the other vessels. So the researchers used a net to retrieve birds from the surface around that vessels, injured or dead, to quantify these injuries. So this is one thing. This was observed in 3 different days, and multiple vessels were doing this in these 3 different occasions. And when the vessels, they were fishing around a fishing aggregating device, like a big floating object that aggregate fish below it. So that was in this occasion, in this scenario, is that when we observed the intentional killing. The other thing is what we call aggressive handling. That is in the opposite to the safe handling, which is safe for fishermen and safe for birds. That's the practice of carefully remove the hooks from the birds and give them time to recover. The aggressive handling simply is the fact of killing or injuring the bird in the process of removing the hook. So what we have seen is that the large numbers, nearly 50 albatrosses without the beaks, with big mutilations. But we have never seen a fisherman doing this in a long time working close to fishermen. We actually don't know what is the fishery doing this. So these birds, what we know is that the birds alive that have those injuries, they were not caught in the long line set, because during the long line set, the birds are dragged in the water and drowned. So those birds were captured alive during the long line hauling, and this can be in pelagic long line or demersal long line across all the Southwest Atlantic. All those birds can be captured by another fishing gear that do not drag the birds underwater, like hand line, or there is a specific fishing gear that's Brazilian long line for dolphin fish that's very shallow and do not drown the birds as well. So those are the possibilities from where these birds got those injuries, but we can say specifically for sure which fishery is doing that. That's the main finding, and this is this is very important because we actually show that we know very little about what's happening at sea without observer programs, without monitoring. So this also brings make difficult to understand the impacts of fisheries on seabird, because, and also to mitigate, because a lot of work that is been doing in Brazil and in other parts of the world is to mitigate seabird bycatch during long run setting, like the birds carrying line weighting, hook pods. But this is another issue that's not related and solved with mitigation measures.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you touched on there about the fisheries that are doing this, and from the way that it's happening. Is there possible that this is much wider distributed than we first thought as well? Because I mean, you know, perhaps naively, it didn't appear to be in the media as such an issue before until kind of recently, and it's just sort of come to light. It's been happening since from your paper for 20 years at least. So could it be much more widely distributed than just the Southwestern Atlantic, or is it at the moment we think localized?
In our data sets, we asked for this kind of information for the Albatross task force instructors in South Africa, Namibia, Brazil, Uruguay, Chile, Peru, Argentina, and local partners. So within this region, South Atlantic and in the Pacific, in the Cone South, in South America, it seems that's more, it's happening more often in the Southwest Atlantic. Within our area of study, but it's very likely that this kind of things is happening in other places, in other fisheries. So we didn't ask for information from the North Hemisphere, for example, or like Australia, New Zealand, and other regions. So we stayed within the region of action of the Albatross task force. That was the spatial scale of our study. But this is a very important result from this paper. It's bringing the attention for this issue and puts a call out for people around the world start looking at this and paying attention at this, and publishing these records as well if they have this information already.
It's about growing that awareness across, and as you say, from these findings, we can start to spread that message. And for anyone that has seen these images coming out as well of albatrosses or petrels with either completely or partly removed bills, I think what was shocking as well is from the 46 or so cases of bill mutations, almost 30 were still alive. What are kind of the survival rates or the hunting successes with those mutations, do we think?
Well, we have no idea. Apparently, most of the birds we have seen at sea without the beaks, they look healthy. Like they were fat, they were foraging with other birds, around fishing vessels. So we don't really know. But the fact is, such injuries, they are likely to reduce the fitness, the foraging capacity of the seabirds. Possibly they are still alive and feeding because they are able to feed on discards. But if they have to eat squids or krill or fish, this will be much more difficult. And also they can die from infections or blood loss. So we don't really know for how long these birds can survive with that injuries. But all birds in this situation that were found on the beach alive, they died within few days in rehabilitation centers. And an albatross with such injury have never been observed around thousands and thousands of albatrosses monitored in South Georgia and also in the Falklands. So this also gives us some indication that these birds perhaps do not survive too much. Otherwise, those birds should be observed in the colonies.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you, Dimas. In terms of as well, because obviously a lot of your work with Projeto Albatroz and as an ATF instructor, what are some of the things that the ATF can be doing, or other groups, to actively combat this this sort of behaviour? What are our mitigation techniques?
Well, this is an issue that what we can do now in short term is education and training, and education and training, and education and training. You know, it's because this must be kind of recurrent and unstoppable. And again, punctual and individual actions of education or training are not likely to be very successful because people, they are very soon they forget, they are busy with their stuff. So this kind of work must be like, all the time in the port, all the time talking to people, involving them in the issue more than just like reporting them albatross curiosities or something like this. They must be involved on that, and they must believe. No, they must understand the threats those birds face, how those birds are at risk of extinction, and how the practices at sea can improve their situation. And fishermen, there is a risk for removing the hook from the bird as well for fishermen. The risk of bites, risk of injuries, seabirds and turtles as well. So we need to implement and training a lot, fishermen for safe handling and best handling practices for removing hooks and handling birds caught alive. And another thing that's important to point about this paper is that the high number of records of albatross in Southwest Atlantic, it's also, I think, this is what I'm feeling, that can be also related to the level of the onboard observers in this region, because we have, seabird experts paying a lot of attention, identifying, a bird with mutilation among, several, sometimes hundreds of birds. So we have people very alert on the vessels that are able to pick these scatter information and collate, and we were able to collate this to show. And another thing is that all the records of stranded birds, the birds found on the beach, alive or dead, they were from Brazil. But this is also related to long-term and large-scale beach monitoring program in Brazil. So we have people every single day covering large areas, hundreds of kilometers of beaches. So that's why we have so many records on the beaches. Possibly, if you have this kind of effort on other countries or other regions, you could find some of these birds, or so it's just a factor that contributed for so much records on Brazil.
You know, that demonstrates as well everything with albatross is large scale. You know, fishing trips are hundreds, thousands of kilometers, not just 10 or 20. So, and that reflects as well with the monitoring from your part, and the work that goes on needs to be on that same scale. And I know a lot of your work is that outreach and those education, as you repeated as well earlier, is that's the key as well. And is there potentially as well now more of a push and a need for kind of on-board monitoring to be able to understand what the fishermen are doing out at sea? Because obviously that's where we can do it on land, and then as they head out onto these vessels, to make sure that those are being carried on as well.
Well, the monitoring at sea is actually how can I say, the mother of all issues related with the bycatch, because we are in a level nowadays that globally, that we already quantify the bycatch, we understand the bycatch, we developed mitigation measures, feasible with operations. Those measures are already into several national regulations and are recommended by, several organizations, including the RFMOs, the regional fisheries management organizations. However, the bottleneck is how we ensure that practices at sea are aligned with regulations, So we actually have an abysm between the paper and the reality, the regulations and the reality. So one way, there is no observer capacity for 100% of the fleets, in the world, or in most of the areas, fishing areas. So remote electronic is the future in this sense, because it's the way to keep the eye in every single vessel and ensure that the fishermen are using the correct practices, are fishing using legal fishing practices, and are not they are complying with the fishing practices that are mandatory or regulated by the authorities in the area they fish. So it is necessary onboard monitoring by observers or by cameras to ensure practice at sea are aligned with regulations.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Dimas. And I think as well, so you're doing a lot of work on the ground and down with these fisheries, but for people, like myself, based here in the UK, I think my nearest albatross is a few thousand kilometers away. What can people be doing from here to help out, to grow awareness? What are some of the steps that you would suggest?
Well, in first place, I think there is an albatross a little bit closer to you. There is an albatross going around the UK and trying to flirt with the gannets. Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did. I think you're right. Up at an RSPB reserve called Benson Cliffs, he showed up. So yeah, we've got one, but you might have a few more than that where you are.
The first thing anyone can help is consuming sustainable seafood, consuming products that came from fisheries with low bycatch levels or certified fisheries, and with fisheries, with products, with traceable, when you know where it was caught, and transparency and sustain products from sustainable fisheries. This is a big step, not only for Albatross, but for the oceans in general. And another thing is people can do for help is help to spread the word, you know, share in their social medias the problems, share the beauty, share the magnificent things those birds can do in the way they live, you know, create this passion, this awareness, this genuine will to save those birds, you know, people want to do good for them. So this is a second thing, you know, spread the word about this problem, and spreading awareness among the population about the threats those birds face and how we can overcome. And another thing is supporting the projects, is supporting the Albatross Task Force, is supporting Projeto Albatroz in Brazil and other organizations that really need the support to carry on doing the training work, awareness work, and the research that's so needed to understand the impacts of the bycatch and for develop solutions together with fishermen to prevent this mortality, and ultimately trying to reduce trying to revert the very delicate conservation situation of the albatrosses.
Absolutely, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Dimas, for chatting to us today and about that paper, and for saying about what you do, and to explain a little bit more about what can be done from wherever anyone is, really.
Thank you, Samuel, again one more time. It's a pleasure, you know, have the chance to speak to a broad audience about this work.
Yeah, thanks again. Thanks, Dimas.